Hi, this is Megan Van Emmen, Extension Beef Cattle Specialist with Montana State University, and this webinar is going to be about bull development and nutrition. So, as we consider our beef herd, which would be more important, the bull or the cow? And I'm hopefully going to make some arguments today as why the bull is the most important aspect of your breeding herd. So, when you're thinking about your bull selection as a herd replacement, you're purchasing those bulls to bring in those genetics into your herd. 87.5% of the genetic makeup of your current calf crop was determined by the last 3 bulls you used. So, the sire makes up 50%, the grandsire makes up 25%, and the great grandsire makes up 12.5%, equaling that 87.5%. So this hopefully is a good argument as to why your bull selection is crucial when determining if you're going to meet your production goals of your herd. And this is mainly true because bulls are only around for as long as you need them. Some may only last a few years, whereas your cows are going to be in your herd for upwards of 10 years, as long as she keeps producing a quality calf. So, selecting a bull, which you will hope will breed between 25 and 35 cows every year, will make up the single largest proportion of your herd versus the cow. Each cow is an individual. The bull influences 25 to 30 head of your calves every year. So there's some goals we can determine here based on bull development. So you want to look at a bull development as developing high quality bulls for certain breeding programs, whether that's your program or those programs of the people you are selling to. Selection criteria to determine which bulls will be moved into your bull replacement category or the sale bulls that you're going to develop. And those all depend on the production goals you have set for your cow herd. Developing those bulls at a reasonable cost without cutting those corners, and which nutritional programs you can use to meet your weight gain goals and your bull development goals. You want to develop well-grown bulls without being over-conditioned. This is something I think is critical, especially in our western state, because those bulls have to walk a long way to cover the needed cows in that herd. Some bulls may end up walking miles a day, and that's to the cows as well as to the feed source and to the water source. So you want to develop bulls that are bred for fitness and well structured versus having them overly finished and conditioned or extremely fleshy. You want those physically fit bulls, and then also having a great herd health program. But you can adapt these development goals as you change your production goals. So choosing bulls that are going to fit your development for the next few years will help meet those production goals. So when you're looking at your bull calves in the fall, at weaning time, we need to think back to the pairings that you have made, especially whether it's a purchased bull or an AI sire. That's going to occur when those cows come through the chute and get AI'd. You're making those pairings based on their EPDs as well as phenotype selection. So bull calf selection actually starts prior to the weaning and prior to calving when you're making these selections. That selection begins at the breeding season. Those pairings, and you want complementary trait selections. You want to look at which cows or heifers are going to be bred to each bull depending on which cow and heifer come through the chute and how you want your production to be met. And remember, not all bull calves are destined to be herd sires. Some are not destined to be in the breeding stock. You want to make your selections early on which calves might be considered bull replacements, because then you can get those non-bull replacements into value-added programs such as early castration or not waiting until weaning and adding the extra stress of castration on those calves, or including any growth implants you might want to administer. And then you have your subgroup of those bulls, and then at weaning you can place additional criteria on those bull calves and select your replacements from there. So when we're talking about post-weaning, we've made our selections and we've got our subset of bulls that we want to feed out to be potential herd replacements. So first off, we want to determine our body weight at weaning. Where are those bull calves starting from? Then, based on when your breeding season is going to occur, especially if you're going to sell or produce some yearling bulls to be used, you need to calculate your average daily gain that's needed before the first of the breeding season and determine how much gain every day those animals need to have. And then develop a ration appropriate to meet those gains. So just a quick note, if you're going to put those bull calves into a feedlot and begin development, especially immediately post-weaning, high stress times, they aren't used to eating out of bunks and things like that, you want to limit those concentrates or grains at 2% of their body weight every day. But don't go directly into 2%. You want to start with a limited amount and increase to 2% of body weight. So starting with a pound maybe of grain and then gradually working up. Free choice hay, especially a good quality hay for those developing bulls. Bulls should be consuming about 3% of their body weight on a dry matter basis every day to meet their needs, with a minimum of about 14% protein diet quality ration. This ensures you're going to meet the needs of those bull calves for their rapid growth post-weaning. Now, when we're thinking about our young bulls, by 14 or 15 months of age, about a year, a little over a yearling, they should be about 50% of their mature body weight. So if you have a bull that's going to be about 2,000 pounds, for his mature body weight, he should weigh about 1,000 pounds by the time he reaches yearling status. Now, for the first breeding season, we want those bulls to be between 60 and 65% of their mature weight. So for that 2,000 pound bull, that's going to be between 12 and 1,300 pounds. And then by the second breeding season, we need him to be between 75 and 80% of his mature weight, which is between 1,500 and 1,600 pounds. Now, something to keep in mind, these are just some general guidelines. These are not end-all be-all suggestions, but it's just something to keep in mind as you're moving forward in your bull development. Those bulls are going to be actively growing for upwards of 5 years, so by the time he's 5 and 6, he's met his growth potential. He's at his mature weight by then. And just keeping that in mind as you move through your bulls, and this can be easily adapted to those bulls that are lighter and smaller framed. So for our yearling bulls, we just want them on a steady plane of nutrition, steady weight gain. We don't want them to become overly fleshy. Now, some things to keep in mind is that for those that go into a bull development ration, a lot of times they can tend to get a little overly fat. We want them at about a body condition score of 6, especially when they're getting ready to go out into the breeding season. We don't want them extremely fleshy, but we need a good fat cover on them so they can draw on those energy reserves, because bulls can lose over 100 pounds just during the breeding season. So we need those bulls to maintain their body condition and their energy as they're trying to service all of those cows. So making sure that they have good fat cover but are not overly fleshy can help with mobility and libido and sperm quality. So to give you an idea, for a bull, depending on the weight, up here at the top, we have between 1,000 and a 2,000 pound bull gaining about half a pound a day with our dry matter intake, energy, and protein. So just taking note that these bulls do require a good quality ration to meet their needs uh, for spermatogenesis and for their energy reserves as they walk and service those cows. So remember that when you're thinking about your your cattle herd as you go through the year, don't forget about your bulls. Make sure you have sufficient nutrition for your bulls so they are prepared for the breeding season once it occurs. I know we tend to not think about bulls so much after the 60 or 90-day breeding season because their job is done for the rest of the year. But especially during the winter months, we want to make sure our bulls are also meeting their nutrient requirements because this ensures that they're going to be in better condition ready and getting ready for the breeding season the following year without having to add a lot of additional feed immediately prior to breeding where they could begin to become overly fleshy. And the reason I say don't allow them to become overly fleshy, there has been some work done where they've speculated that those bulls that are overly fleshy begin to internalize the fat and actually increase the fat content in their scrotum, which can then in turn reduce spermatogenesis and sperm quality, therefore reducing the number of cows that that bull may be able to service. And just because he has the ability to service 25 to 30 cows every year doesn't necessarily mean that he is doing that job. Especially if you're utilizing multiple bulls in a single pasture, you can see dominance in those bulls. And if your dominant bull is not fertile, he can still try and service those cows and not allow those other bulls to have a chance, therefore causing reproduction problems in your herd. So keep that in mind. We'll cover more on fertility and breeding soundness exams in that webinar. So the next big question is, what should I pay for my bull? So there's a couple of rules of thumb out there that many producers follow. And it all just depends on your production practices, your cattle herd. These are just a couple rules of thumb to keep in mind as you're looking to purchase those bulls in the spring. So the first rule of thumb is about 2 times the value of a fed steer. Well, this obviously varies from year to year. So if we look at the value of a fed steer at $1.09 per hundredweight. So if we take a fat steer, let's say at 1350 final weight, we multiply that by 1.09 and then multiply by 2, we get roughly $3,000. Now, the second rule of thumb is about 5 times the price of a feeder calf at weaning. So, as everybody is aware, feeder calf prices have varied quite widely in the last few years. So if prices go up, you can afford maybe to pay a little bit more on that bull. If prices go down, you may want to reduce your budget. But if we take a 600-pound feeder calf at weaning, we're going to pay $1.59 per hundredweight. That gets us about $4,800 for purchasing a bull, where we could see that benefit for our cattle. So I just created a range there between, according to these rules of thumb, between $3,000 and $5,000. Now this is all highly dependent on your herd and your production goals and your economics. These are just rules of thumb that you can keep in mind as you're going to look at those bulls. So I think one of the big questions is, are better genetics worth additional costs that you may want to spend? And depending on what your end goals will depend on how much you want to spend on a more superior genetically based bull. So if we take 2 bulls here for a genetic cost, we have bull A, weaning weight EPD is 72, yearling weight EPD of 101. Bull B, weaning weight EPD of 65, yearling weight EPD of 92. So as this would indicate, Bull A of the same breed as Bull B has a greater EPDs for weaning weight and yearling weight. The difference at weaning being 7 pounds, the difference at yearling weight being 9 pounds. Well, each bull is going to sire 30 calves per year. At weaning, they would have received $1.59. As a yearling, $1.44. So the annual advantage is the additional pounds Bull A would have at weaning or as a yearling times the number of calves produced every year times the price. So if we multiply this out, row C times D times E, Bull A would have an advantage of about $334 over Bull B because of the additional 7 pounds on those calves produced at 30 calves. Now, as a yearling, he had an additional 9 pounds for those calves. We see about a $390 increase in value of Bull A over Bull B. Each is going to stay in the herd for 5 years. And so to get the lifetime advantage of those bulls, we look at multiplying the annual advantage by the number of years. In his lifetime, Bull A will have about a $1,700 advantage over Bull B and about a $1,900 advantage over Bull B for yearling weight. So looking for superior genetics can aid in increased revenue. Therefore, you may be able to increase your purchase price of those superior genetics. But it's important to pencil this out to determine whether or not this is going to be an advantage, because some things to consider are if he gets injured after the first year or the second year, if he doesn't make his 5-year plan for you. Additionally, calf prices change every year, so this will go up or down depending on the price you will receive from those calves. And also something to consider for EPDs, which we will get into in a different webinar, is how established are these EPDs? How accurate are they? Are these 2 young bulls that are still being established in the breed organization? And so therefore these numbers may change based on the offspring information submitted. So just something to keep in mind as you're looking at those bull genetic catalogs and sale catalogs. Some other breeding considerations for your bulls would be, how big is the herd? How far will that bull have to travel? How big is that pasture? What's your cow to bull ratio? Average between 25 and 30 cows per bull. This is for mature bulls, not yearling bulls. Yearling bulls, we would want to reduce that ratio to approximately, 15 to 20 head maybe for a yearling bull tops versus a mature bull. How old is your bull? How old are what's your average age of your bull herds, and who is most dominant? For those that are in that registered herd system, when you receive those EPDs back and you receive the parentage, this may be important to determine which bulls are actually siring more of your calves. How old are your cows? Are you trying to look for bulls that could be put on your mature herd or bulls that should be put on your heifers? What are his EPDs and how long is your breeding season? If bulls lose upwards of 100 pounds in a breeding season, the longer that breeding season goes, the longer and more of a chance that those bulls have to becoming injured or losing a significant amount of weight and becoming less fertile. Additional considerations, kind of going back to what we stated previously, your bull selection begins prior to the breeding season. Selecting those pairings between the bulls and the cows or heifers can help you determine which animals after calving you would want to propagate in your herd, which genetics you would want to look for. You want to select bulls that are going to fit your operation and your production goals. Everybody's production goals are different, and so establishing your own goals can really help you make these bull breeding decisions. We want to shoot for a body condition score of 6 for our bulls as they enter the breeding season. We want them to be in sufficient condition where they have some energy reserves to draw on, but not so overly fleshy where we worry about maybe there's some sperm quality or spermatogenesis issues due to the excessive fat, both internally as well as within the scrotum. A breeding soundness exam is probably the most important investment for your breeding season, especially on your bull side. But one thing to keep in mind, which we'll get into more in our BSE webinar, is that the BSE is only good for that day. And we need to remember that the bull spermatogenesis cycle is about 60 days long. So if something occurs within that 60-day window prior to the breeding season, but after your BSE, then you could have reduced fertility in some of your bulls. So needing to keep that in mind as you're getting your BSEs completed. And I think all in all is just selecting bulls that fit your operation genetically and phenotypically. Look, if you have the chance, look at the bulls, watch them, go to the bull sale if at all it's a possibility. Watch them walk, watch them move around the pen, and try and determine if that bull is going to fit your physical environment as well, especially if you're in areas with a lot of terrain and not quite as flat. Is it extremely rocky? Are they going to have to climb some hillsides to get to those bulls? You want those bulls to be in good physical shape so they're ready to go for you and your operation. With that, I'm Megan Van Emmen, Extension Beef Cattle Specialist with Montana State University. Thanks and have a great day.